Welcome back. Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink is blaming striking SAMU workers for a violent attack on a metro employee over the weekend. That's after the worker was hijacked, according to reports, then shot and left for dead after allegedly being warned not to report for duty. Let's talk more about this with the Mayor. Very good evening to you, Mayor Brink. Is there any doubt that this attack perpetrated over the weekend was the work of striking workers?
Well, we can't say it was the work of striking workers, but the circumstances clearly indicate that there seems to be a link to the strike. What happened was that earlier in the evening on Saturday, a group of people approached officials who were working on water repairs, and they warned the officials, they said to them, Tshwane is on strike, you shouldn't be working, you must stop working. They ignored those folks. But the same group of people, identified by the car that they were driving in, then followed one of the officials home, and that's when the attack happened. So the official concerned has positively identified the same group of people that warned him not to work as the people who attacked him. I visited him in hospital yesterday, and he confirmed that to me. So there is little doubt that this is strike-related. And it also accords with some of the other tactics that we've seen in this unprotected strike. Trucks being stoned, officials being pushed around, nurses and patients being violently removed from clinics. So this unprotected SAMU strike is taking a turn for the worst. And I'm afraid that unless SAMU takes responsibility and reins in their members, this is going to turn ugly. And it's important that we act before it does.
The challenge now is that what you are saying is that the employee of the city who was attacked has said that basically the attackers were the same people who warned him and colleagues, as I understand it, who were working at a site over the weekend not to work because of an ongoing strike. All you have is that warning and the fact that the same people are alleged to have carried out this attack, but there's nothing that says for sure that the attackers were employed by the city or motivated by the strike itself, right?
Well, the fact that they warned the officials not to work, I think that is a clear indication that they were motivated by the strike. And if you take the surrounding circumstances, to be frank, the violence, the intimidation, the work stoppages across the city that involved violent tactics, I think it would be ridiculous to say that this does not have a link to the strike. And I think it would be a very dangerous game for SAMU to play, because if somebody does get killed, and we pray to God that it does not happen, then we will have to try and backtrack somehow. So our message is, let's try and prevent this. There's clearly a spate of violent attacks in the city of Tshwane. There's clearly an unprotected strike. It's clearly escalating. And it would be madness to play games of rhetoric about this incident. Instead, let's try and contain the situation and prevent somebody from really getting hurt.
SAMU's retort to you would be that they've not sanctioned any of these assaults, and that if someone chooses, whether they're a City of Tshwane employee or sympathizer with those who are striking, if they choose to attack one of the workers who are reporting for duty, they are not responsible for that because they have not, that's not their line of march basically, and in fact they've called for calm.
So, in fact, SAMU's leadership has not made a clear call on employees to return to work. You have SAMU shop stewards quoted in newspaper articles referring to the strike. So, I mean, there is no clear, unambiguous message to the outside by SAMU's leadership. If there were, you would have a SAMU representative saying, we call for people to return to work, we condemn any acts of violence, but they don't do that because they're playing a double game. Obviously, they make these arguments, oh, they don't know about an unprotected strike when they're in court. But look at the reality on the ground. We see the delays. We see employees telling us they're being intimidated. We see violence and intimidation. And, we can't simply accept a SAMU standing back and saying, oh, no, we've got absolutely nothing to do with this. They have chosen the violent, disruptive route, and they must be called to account for it.
They say they've taken this course of action and are continuing, in fact, with the industrial action because they don't believe that the city of Tshwane cannot afford to pay increases. Words such as an arrogant city, one that is treating workers unfairly, punishing workers for the mismanagement of city funds that had nothing to do with them. That's just some of the rhetoric that's come from the side of Labour, and they say they're not coming to the table to speak to you to try to resolve this because you yourselves have not acted in a way that shows that you're willing to meet them halfway and have, in fact, I'm paraphrasing, been dishonest in the claim that there's not enough money to pay these increases.
So the fact that, and I understand you're paraphrasing, but the fact that SAMU is making a case of industrial action is clearly indicating that there's an unlawful strike and that is a contravention of a court order. So, before you even get into the merits of the case, you're dealing with clear dishonesty on their side, denying industrial action, but then saying this is why we've been embarking on industrial action. As for the merits of the case, Tshwane, if SAMU can find money that the City Council of Tshwane cannot find in considering the revenue, the expenditure, the budgetary situation, then they must make that case at the bargaining council. Our exemption application approved by the City Council is to be heard on the 24th of August. And in terms of the collective agreement, that is the avenue that is to be used where arguments are to be made. It's not to be made by sabotaging services, intimidating fellow workers, trashing the streets, attacking contractors. That is not how things are done. And, as for the accusation of arrogance, residents look to the city to deliver services. They are asking us, why is waste not being collected? Why is electricity not being repaired after days? Why are there water and sewage leaks not being attended to? So we have to be responsible and accountable to those residents. And of course, we have to also make responsible financial decisions. If a SAMU knows about corruption and mismanagement, we've invited them several times to work with the leadership of the city to try and act against it. But the point is, if there is no money, there is no money. And if we do irresponsible things like spending money on things that we haven't budgeted for, in contravention of what the City Council has instructed us to do, we are going to lead the city down a road of financial ruin that will see employees losing their jobs, not even to come to salary increases.
What happens if the bargaining council does not grant you the exemption?
Well, we'll have to consider our options then. There are appeals and reviews that can be taken up. But the point is, if there's no money, there's no money. So, of course, we will abide by whatever the process is. If the bargaining council makes a finding, we'll consider our options to take it to the Labour Court, the Labour Appeals Court. But ultimately, if the end of the line is that we have to pay, then we'll have to face the disastrous consequences of having to pay those increases, and it will probably lead to a cutback of services.
I want to pick up on the issue of workers possibly losing their work. Is that on the table? Is the cutting of jobs a consideration for the Tshwane Metro at this point?
No. We are, in an orderly way, submitted our exemption application. We wanted to be heard. Unfortunately, in the meantime, there is a vicious, violent criminal assault on the services and infrastructure of the city, including our ability to collect revenue. This assault is leading to a deterioration of the city's position. It is destroying the trust between the city and residents. And unfortunately, if this is prolonged, if this assault is continued, then the deterioration of the city's financial position will mean that nothing is off the cards. We will then have to look at how do we save and rescue the situation? And yes, Tembekile, the action of SAMU is potentially threatening the jobs and the job security of Tshwane employees. We have to be absolutely crystal clear about that. If people who are participating in the strike think that there is some money being hidden by the city, they are being lied to. There is no money. We are on the absolute edge. And if we don't make very, very responsible decisions about the future, we might not have a city to go back to.
Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight.